Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for Monday, November 5th, 2018. The MLS Eastern Conference and Western Conference semifinal have played their first legs yesterday. Duane, did you enjoy the 4-game marathon yesterday?
I did. It was a little long, a little hard on the bum from sitting in one place for so long. It was a good day, though, and I also watched the Canada Under-20 game, too, so it was really a lot of soccer, but I shouldn't really complain. Kevin, before we go any further, we should congratulate our mutual friend David Foote on his personal news of the weekend, because I know he listens to the show, so congratulations, David. It seems like a keeper for you. You should probably be good to her, and we'll move on from there.
Yeah, that was a fun weekend in Montreal with my one of my good friends. So, congratulations, David. But moving on to soccer talk here. 4 games in the MLS playoffs yesterday. And yes, Canada did play U20 versus Guadeloupe after their first game earlier last week versus Dominica. 2 wins. We'll finish the show by addressing those 2 wins and previewing this week's 2 Solitude Soccer podcasts for patrons only, which you can get for $2 a month at patreon.com/sports podcast network. Let's start with the first game yesterday, Duane. 3 p.m. Eastern time. The Columbus Crew versus the New York Red Bulls. The Crew did it again.
They did. They continue to go on. Zach Steffen with a great save late in that game to avoid that being a draw, which would have been a massive shift in that. And the Red Bulls, questions start to get answered again. They're only got a goal. And if they can handle them at home, then this is not a big deal. But the pressure is going to mount on a team that has all of that history weighing on top of it.
That's so Metro. That's so Metro.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I tapped that in the middle of the first half. This is getting a little Metro, to be honest. And it was when they were missing chance after chance. New York had a lot of opportunity to score. And having watched them in the playoffs last year, firsthand, right in front of me, it was the same issue. That there's something, I don't know whether they type bum time or whatever. I don't know. There's something happened. Squeaky bum time. That's the term I was looking for. It's like there seems to be maybe a mental issue there, and it has to be that history on top of you. History doesn't matter in the sense that it has nothing, the fact that Red Bulls didn't win yesterday has nothing to do with the fact that, they lost to DC United in 1998. But the history, when you're asked about it all the time, does start to pile up. It is very difficult for teams that have that kind of weight on them to overcome them. It can happen, not to be flippant about this or to make another joke about it, but it happened in hockey last year, so it's not impossible. But until you get the breakthrough, until you get some bounces, then it's going to be tough. It's a bounce is the key. I mean, we talk about luck all the time on this show and how we don't like to address it, but it's there. I think the Red Bulls need a little luck. They're only down a goal, but that goal seems huge right now, does it not?
Yeah, it does seem huge, too, especially how it happened and the fact that Columbus was able to keep the clean sheet at home and give them a certain advantage going to Red Bull Arena. If they get a goal, if they get any draw scenario, they're moving on. So the famous more scenario give Columbus the advantage to move on than none. So that's interesting. For me, when I looked at this game, too, what was fascinating to me was Greg Berhalter's tactical switch within the old 4-4-2 with Higuain on the bench, keeping Higuain fresh for the end of the game. Actually did change this whole complexity of the game, and it brought more intrigue. Then as soon as Higuain got onto the field, I'm like, wow, this is changing quickly. And Columbus did get the game winner at that point. And yes, there was a few great saves, but you mentioned Zach Steffen. There was another clear off the line by a Columbus defender. Columbus did hold on. They hold on for dear life. But Columbus get the 1-0 win versus New York in the first leg. Here's a few topics we'll talk about each game quickly. In your opinion, Duane, what's the high point of this game? It has to be the Columbus goal.
Or the save. I think that save at the end. Yeah, Steffen's save at the end. He got down, strong arm there. To me, was maybe the the moment that made that, because an away goal is so huge in the playoffs. So I'm also curious. I'm curious, Kevin, how he keeps someone French, but we'll leave that one well enough alone there. But anyway, I thought that was kind of funny. I thought it was some kind of new term because they won the World Cup.
Yeah, keeping it French. Sure.
Yeah, there you go. All right, fair enough.
Yeah, and the low point has to be for Red Bull, in my mind, that missed opportunity for the goals, or maybe the non-reaction, because this is one thing that was fascinating to me in the couple of games yesterday, is the reaction of the other team after scoring a goal. We'll get to the Seattle-Portland game, and we'll get to the RSL-SKC game, where after a goal, the other team reacted really quickly to diminish the momentum aspect of a playoff game, which can be important, right? Momentum is one of those intangible that sometimes you can't put a finger on it, but you feel in the stadium. You feel either as a fan, as a journalist, as a player, you feel it shifting, you feel it going one way or another. And momentum, for me, is pretty much the building of confidence on either side. And once you answer a goal quickly with another goal, it kind of nullifies it a bit. Red Bulls did not answer that goal.
No, for sure. And the low point to me is simply what I've already spoken to, is the inability to overcome that history, the inability to find those goals. I mean, I remember last year, obviously, to point to their playoff appearance against Toronto last year when Clutchton started a brawl in the tunnel at halftime. Well, maybe they needed that kind of fire there. I'm not saying start a brawl in the tunnel, but maybe they needed a little something that way. Maybe they needed some kind of wake-up call for this team, because it's been so good. It was so good in the regular season. It would be an awful shame for this to end for them in just 2 games. But, Columbus continues to be a great story in terms of the fairy tale-ness of it, the save of the crew. And we even saw Crew Cat make a return yesterday. Although he's not called Crew Cat anymore. He's called SC Cat, which is a ridiculous name. He's Crew Cat. SC is a ridiculous thing anyway. I was debating that on Twitter. But nonetheless, I was also arguing with the owner of the Portland Timbers on Twitter. I was having a good day on Twitter. Twitter.
Well, you wish you had a good day on Tinder.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
wished it. But no, it's true. You and Mary Paulson had an interesting exchange yesterday. Talking about the stands, too, and let's move to this point. Does the fan in Columbus, did they have time to buy tickets? What's with the empty stands at Crew Stadium?
Well, there was empty stands at RSL as well.
Yes.
It's tough.
And Yankee Stadium. There was lots of in Yankee Stadium, too.
Yeah, I mean, this is the argument I was having with Merrick on Twitter, was that you're born in third, thought you hit a triple when you don't come in as the 96 team. Those legacy markets have trouble because they have so much they lost the plot early on, right? And when you can only make a first impression once, that's why they try and rebrand. And the rebranding of a team like Kansas City has worked. But in terms of the Columbus's rebrand, this was actually, if you want to be serious about my argument on Twitter, I know I keep on Tinder, Twitter yesterday, was that it was a bad rebrand in the sense that it wasn't a rebrand enough. Either you go all the way up or all the way down. You don't try and tweak your current brand and think that that's going to change anything or give you a fresh start in the market.
Yeah,
we'll see. It's been a tough year in Columbus. Yeah. Those fans were put through the ringer, and the fact that the club was saved is awesome. But I'm sure, I'm not in their heads, but I'm sure that many of them feel that they're not going to give Precourt a penny until he's gone. They're not going back to that stadium until he's gone, and I don't blame them for that.
Oh, really yeah. If I remember feeling this way about my Montreal Expos, I'm like, I'm not going to give Jeffrey Loria my money, even though I want to go to save the franchise. I'm not going to give him my money because he wants to get rid of my franchise. So no, I do get that feeling. All right, let's move to the second game of the day in the Western Conference, Portland versus Seattle. And in my mind, this was the game of the day because of the rivalry, the atmosphere at Providence Park, and the 5 minutes of madness, I call it. Seattle opens it up 10 minutes in with Rui Diaz scoring a nice goal. Portland answers right back with a goal, and then just a few minutes later takes the lead 2-1, and that's how it would finish the first leg, 2-1 Portland at home.
And well, then all Seattle's players got hurt, and I think we watched the end of maybe the greatest defender in MLS history's career end in front of us ourselves, and to jump ahead, that was the low point of not just that game but of the day, was watching Chad Marshall writhing in pain. I don't think there's an argument. I think he is the greatest defender in MLS history, and was timeless until that moment. But yeah it was a madness. And was it the best game? For sure it was. It was by far the most entertaining game of the day. And I said on the pregame or the show last week that I think Tifo and all that sort of stuff's a little overrated in terms of what it actually brings to the table. But certainly when you have a rowdy atmosphere, it does make it feel that you're having there's an occasion, right? And that's why the empty seats are problematic in the playoffs. And but it was a fun game to watch, and unfortunately with the injuries, but it was a fun game for sure on the field as well. And I think Seattle's done. I do. If they can't bring back those players, I think they're done. And maybe that's good for the league to have a little difference in the final. Saddle 3 in a row would be a great story, but maybe it's for the best that they're not.
Yeah, Chad Marshall injured his right knee, and as soon as he went down, he was waving the sideline saying, "I need help. I need to be subbed off." And that was the second early sub for Seattle in this game, because Christian Roldan was subbed out as well at about the 29th, 30th minute with an injury as well. Providence Park's turf got two injured players in Seattle yesterday, and that's just the ones that are big ones. There was a few knocks here and there as well. But Portland gets the win at home. Seattle gets an away goal. And one thing I thought it was interesting watching this game, following social media too, is because it's a rivalry game, it would have been very surprising to have a dodgy, catchy type of game where 0-0, just a tactical. No, those teams know each other so well, they're just going after it. And I thought that's one of the reasons why this game was fun to watch as it was, is because of the familiarity of the two teams versus each other, and because they just go after it. Like, I don't mind losing 3-2. Example, if you're Seattle, you're trying to get that second goal, you would open up, because even if you lose 3-2, you still got 2 goals on the road, and you come back home, you win 1-0, and you're through. So there was that aspect that made this game interesting.
Yeah, look, there's always that risk when you're talking about these home and homes, right? That they're going to have sort of cagey first legs. And I thought overall MLS was lucky yesterday, and all 4 of these games weren't that way. Because it's very easy. I mean, maybe the Columbus-New York game was to an extent, perhaps, in terms of it was only 1 goal, and it was kind of defensive by Columbus, even though they were at home, and maybe that was the cagiest of all the games. But it certainly was, I think, overall a pretty good offensive day. There's really no answer to that. There's no perfect format. I mean, they used to, back in the day, go 2 out of 3s in MLS in the playoffs, and that was, of course, seen as anti-soccer, so they moved away from that quick, although I don't actually mind it. I know that they, in other sports, have what they call a mini game. So you do your 2 games, and whoever has the most points in the 2 games in terms of not goals but points, so you can play full on. If it's tied, then they have what they play like a short game. I like that idea, but I think that's probably a little too out there for the average soccer fan who tends to be conservative when it comes to this stuff. But nonetheless, it was an overall pretty good game.
And if you look at this thing as a whole, it's a cup tournament, right? So we're used to the home and away format that a cup tournament does put forward, and I have to say I like it. But this is a conversation we had last year, the year before. Does finishing at home really is an advantage? Because for me, I wish I had the choice. Example, you finish higher in the standings, you have the choice. You want to start at home and you want to start on the road. Our expression here, points on the board are points in the pocket. Well, goals on the scoreboard are goals in the pocket. And if you start at home, you win by 2-3 goals, or you get a few goals and you get a clean sheet, puts the pressure on the other team. I know that the second leg, some things can change, but we've seen over the last few years, teams getting the advantage after the first round usually get the job done in the second, so it'll be interesting. We've talked about the low point, of course, of this Portland-Seattle match was seeing Chad Marshall's right knee blown up and maybe his career being over. Would you say the high point of this one, what would you say it is?
Portland's response, I would say, to put it in general terms, the fact that they went down early, and this is a Seattle team that's been rolling for the better part of the year, and you could definitely see, especially tired, Portland played midweek, Seattle did not. You could have seen them go, damn, it's over, right? We lost the away goal, whatever. Their psychological ability to respond to that, I think, was the high point for me.
All right, now moving on to NYCFC, Baby City, as you like to call them, versus Atlanta United. This one finished 1-0 Atlanta, but the scoreboard does not represent the ins and outs of this game. Atlanta was full measure, found a way to play at Yankee Stadium, and if it wasn't for about 3 centimeters offside by Miguel Almiron and a few other missed chances by Atlanta, this one could have been a blowout.
It could have been, and once again, New York does not perform in the playoffs. This is becoming a consistent thing. We've seen them not just not perform, but to be badly beaten, badly outplayed in playoff games at Yankee Stadium, where you would think that they would have a massive advantage. This is not. It's gotten to the point of trend now. This is not a one-off. So they need to evaluate that, because this is a league that is set up to be a playoff league. So if you can't figure out how to win in the playoffs, you can't figure out how to change your game, how to adjust your game in such a way, then there's a problem there. So you're right. We talked about Atlanta, after the fallout of the Toronto game and the way that they sort of choked up the Shield there. We thought maybe that might have been an indicator that they'd slipped back. They went down and got the job done pretty easily. And coming out of the first round of these games, it's the team that I would be most surprised to see cough it up at home. I think that NYCFC is done, and they haven't been good all second half of the year too, so we should point that out as well.
The only good performances they had was against Philadelphia in the last weekend of the regular season and in the first knockout round. Outside those two games, they had about a 10-game stretch where everything looked difficult for NYCFC, and when you think about it, a 10-game stretch is literally 1/3 of the season. So for 1/3 of the season, they just relied on the first 2/3 where they scored a lot of points. So NYCFC trailing 1-0. For me, the high point in this one was the, I would say, commitment Miguel Almiron showed to Atlanta by coming back from injury probably too early, Duane. Like, we never really knew the extent of his injuries, but I think it was pretty severe. And his commitment to start that game at Yankee Stadium, to come back and give Atlanta a shot in the arm, like we say, of motivation, of confidence, even though he might be jeopardizing, if he aggravates his injury, for next year, his big move, maybe to Arsenal, maybe to somewhere else. He could be jeopardizing his short-term future, but he's willing to do so to help Atlanta in these playoffs. And for me, if I'm a teammate of him, I'm like, look what this guy's doing. I have to give him my all. I have to go for it. And we've seen the Atlanta of a few weeks ago.
Yeah, look, this is it for them, right? One way or the other, this will not be the same team next year. They may be as good. We don't know. We'll see how they retool. But for sure, for this particular group of guys, their coach is leaving. Their better players are probably leaving. This is their one shot. And as silly as it is to talk about a 2-year-old team building or reloading, it's what's happening. So this is the end of an era, so to speak, within a very young team.
Their window is closing. They had a 2-year window, and it's about to close. But Atlanta, 1-0. For me, the low point was literally NYCFC's response. And I guess they felt tired, maybe. That would be the only explanation. But NYCFC, we talk about the Metro Stars, we talk about the Red Bulls coughing goals in the playoffs. Well, I guess it's a New York thing.
Yeah, that's New York. I guess if I were to be more specific, I would say, where was Villa? This is a guy that's lit this league up, and in the playoffs, he consistently has really just not stood out. He hasn't been noticeable, and that's a problem for your best player.
Yeah, and in the playoffs, tactically speaking, if you're a team playing against New York, you would literally put 2, 3, 4 guys on Villa if necessary. Like, okay, I'd rather have Matarrita all alone than have Villa all alone. So let's make sure that we counter tactically the presence of Villa on the field. All right, last game last night, Real Salt Lake Sporting Kansas City. Another interesting one, and again, Mike Petke with one of his great quotes at halftime. It's like, Mike, what do you think about the first half? Well, players are more tired than I thought they were, and that's a problem. We're going to need to address it. And they did. They scored the opening goal, but SKC with the response Actually, Real Salt Lake's goal was beautiful at the 51st minute. And Rubio comes in at the 59th minute. And at the 60th minute, nice little curled right shot to the far post. Nothing Raimondo can do about it. And it's 1-1. SKC with the away goal. 1-1 after the first leg between those two teams.
Yeah, well, Mike Petke he was the very first player in MLS that wasn't on a Canadian team that I ever interviewed way back when in the It's Called Football days. By the way, it'll be 10 years next year that I've been doing this stuff. God, I'm old. How'd that happen? Anyway, but he's always been candid. He's always put it out there, and even when he was a player. So it didn't surprise me to hear that. I thought it was an interesting game. It was a fun game, more than I expected, and that goal. Oh, that Rustak goal, that volley was maybe I'm hard pressed to see a better goal this playoff.
Well, the play itself of Rusnak giving it to the RSL player, I don't have it in front of me, so I don't have his name, and the pass back with the head right away to give it at the top of the box, the ball to Rusnak. One touches it into the back of the net. That whole build-up play was great, and it's about a 10-pass build-up play where you see RSL players diving at the top of SKC's box to get the ball back. Then they put themselves back in position. They do a few passes to open up lanes. They find Rusnak finds his teammate and then gets the ball back and finishes it. So it was a nice build-up play too. And Real Salt Lake finished 6th in the Western Conference. SKC finished 1st. This could have been a blowout. But that's so MLS, and the disparity between the two wasn't that big in this one. We'll see in the return leg in Kansas City.
Yeah, no, RSL has done very well together. They're playing with house money, so to speak, at this point, right? So they're playing loose, and I thought they played well, and they probably deserved the win if it wasn't for the goalkeeping error, or basically the clearance error at the end. Kansas City is going home down 1-0. I still like Kansas City to win this series, though. I think that as Mike Petke said, RSL is a pretty tired team right now. They do have a week before when is the next game exactly?
They're all Sunday except for Seattle-Portland, which is Thursday evening.
Yes, I was trying to remember which game was Thursday. And that has to do with, of course, the fact that the Sounders don't control their own stadium, so they have to play around the Seahawks.
Seahawks are playing at home on Sunday, so that's why.
Yeah, and if you're going to be the capital of soccer in North America, Cascadia, you might want to get your own stadiums, but that's just me.
Just throwing a bit more oil on the fire.
Throwing some more gas on that fire, yeah.
It's true.
Might want to put some grass in those fields, too. Anyway.
Yeah, maybe your players wouldn't destroy their knee. That's one thing. But Real Salt Lake SKC will have a week to get back into game shape. So maybe RSL won't be as tired next Sunday.
Yeah, and look, again, playing with house money is the term I'll use here, and good for them. Whatever happens in Kansas City is going to be good, but obviously SKC was the best team in the West for most of the year in terms of the most consistent team anyway, and they have to be the heavy favorite, having got that road goal, which matters. But only one draw in all these games, and I don't think anyone would have guessed that this would have been the only draw. I don't know, but it was it was more entertaining than I thought it was going to be. Is what I'll end with that one.
Yeah, so we talked about the high points, low points. Let's talk about the best game out of those four. We mentioned it earlier. For me, Duane, Portland, Seattle, that Cascadia derby, that 3-goal affair, that 5 minutes of madness where Portland conceded it and then scored twice. I think that was the best game for me.
Yeah, as much as I want to be a contrarian, just for the sake of it, I can't disagree with you there. It had a lot of drama going on, and if you like the crowd stuff, and a lot of people do, then certainly it had that. It had the injuries, which aren't fortunate, but they certainly do add to the narrative of the series.
Yeah, they do.
You got the history between the two cities. It's the second best rivalry in Major League Soccer. Yes, I said second, and we know what the first is.
Yep.
And
if you want to know which one is the best rivalry in Major League Soccer, go back to 2016, the Eastern Conference Finals. Watch those two games again, and you'll know what we're talking about.
Yeah, 1,000 years of history right there, folks. Not 100. Anyway, but still good rivalry for sure.
Yeah.
And it's it had it all. I enjoyed the late game. I fell asleep, to be honest with you, so I watched it in highlight form, in 20-minute highlight form. But I did enjoy watching it. But I've got to give the nod, obviously, to Seattle-Portland, and quick turnaround for that second leg, which is probably, Seattle's really going to be kicking themselves, because with the injury problems and that quick turnaround, it's going to be a tough one for them, I think.
The worst game. So I'll start again. For me, I would have thought before the beginning of the day that SKC had the shot to win this worst game of the day, but after watching the three latest game, Columbus New York Red Bull for me was obviously the I wouldn't say the worst game, but the least of them all. For me,
it wasn't a bad game, but it was cagey, is how I said, and the fact that New York couldn't get things going forward. Again, I'd like to be contrarian, but I can't be. We agree on these two games.
Now, Duane, when we look at the happiest team, the team with the most surprising result, basically, in this first leg of the conference semifinals, in your opinion, who's the happiest about their performance?
I mean, I just called it a cagey game, but I think Columbus has to be the happiest with the keeping the clean sheet at home, holding serve, so to speak, to borrow another sports analogy. They go in against the best team in the league all year. This is the Shield winners that have been consistent all year, and they get them down. And you look at their record against NYRB, they have a very good record. They're undefeated against them this year, and they continue to be so. So I would have to say Columbus, particularly considering the ringer or emotional roller coaster they've been through all year, has to be pretty stoked heading into that second leg.
I have to agree with you. Now, the saddest team in these first legs of the conference semifinals, this one could be interesting because the result is not that terrible for me, but Seattle, after that loss at Portland, first of all, they lose to their rivals, so they're sad. They lose Roldan maybe, and Marshall probably for sure for next game. So for me, Seattle is the saddest team. They're curled up in a corner crying.
Maybe. Yeah, no, I understand your argument there. We're going for the first time in this going to disagree on what the saddest team is, and I'm simply going to go with I'm going chalk, basically. It's NYCFC. It's the only home team to lose. You can't lose. You can't allow a goal at home, let alone lose. And they went and lost and stumped the bed, again, to borrow that phrase that I invented last week. And, yeah.
Yeah. You know, the player of the day. Who made the most impressive performance? And there's a name that for me in playoff situation over the last few years, most of the time, so when they were there in 2015 and this year so far, always steps up. And it's a player that sometimes is a bit low profile, but he always delivers. I'm talking about Diego Valeri. Always delivers. Always either delivers assists, delivers goals, deliver breakthrough performances, nice passing lane, opens up lanes. For me, Diego Valeri has been my outstanding player in leg one of the conference semifinals.
He kind of gets a bit of that West Coast bias in terms of him not being as recognized as being among the league's superstars as much as perhaps he should be. The West Coast bias in MLS isn't quite the same. And when I say West Coast bias, what I mean is that most voters for MVPs and so on and so forth live in the Eastern time zone, so they don't stay up late and they don't see Western games. So those players tend to get overlooked when it comes to individual accolades. But I think because MLS is a bit different, this is less of a case, but I do think for sure that Valeri has been underrated a little bit, partially for that reason. But I am going to go, my player of game one is a little bit different and has to do with what I said up the top, because I think it was the biggest individual moment of the entire first round of games was Zach Steffen's save. Because, again, it's a massive difference between going back to New York down a goal or tied 1-1 and going up a goal. And just in terms of what confidence boost that would give to them to believe in their keeper at the back, Steffen is a guy that get a lot of talk about when you're talking about the top keepers in the league, but it's consistently done the job. And obviously New York's got it in their mind that maybe they're snake bitten in the playoffs too. So I think it was a massive moment, and for that reason I will give him my player of game day one.
And his performance in the penalty shootout as well earlier this week was impressive, where against DC United made two big stops and was in the head of the DC United players. And if it has to go to penalties next week, well, next Sunday, Zach Steffen's going to be tough to beat. So that's going to be interesting, too. Now, let's finish the show, Duane, by talking very quickly about the U20's CONCACAF Championship. Canada has played 2 games so far, a 4-0 win versus Dominica, and a 2-1 close affair, but still a win thanks to the subs against, I just have it on top, who did they playing on this Sunday? Guadalupe. I knew it was a G. I knew it was a J.
They played Guadalupe.
Guadalupe, perfect. So, 2-1 against Guadalupe. So, what did you think about our Canada U20 CONCACAF's beginning of the championship so far?
it obviously got a little dodgy against Guadeloupe because they, Guadeloupe tied it up early in the second half, I should say, and it was against the flow. Canada had all of the action. The keeper for Guadeloupe played very, very well, and Canada could have scored 4 or 5 goals, but they didn't, which was a bit troubling. Now, I think there's a couple caveats you have to put in this. Canada did not play its top lineup. They were resting because they know that the game tomorrow, which is against Panama, is basically a do-or-die game that's going to decide who wins this group, and the winner of the group is the only one that goes on to the next round. This is an unforgiving format, and especially if you're in a position like a country like Canada where you are the number 2 seed, you don't have a group where you're expected to win every game. And, basically, for those that don't know, the U.S., Mexico, Honduras, Panama, Costa Rica, and Guatemala were the number 1 seeds head in the groups. Group F is the only group that is kind of tight in terms of who their best played teams are. It's hard to see the rest of the groups have a clear favorite and second favorite. And Canada, because of their performance in U20s, is the second favorite in Group E. Group D, they're in. There's too many groups in this. Yeah. This format, for those that don't know, they've added teams, so there's a lot more. Guadeloupe's in it, and St. Kitts and Nevis and Martinique, Dominica are the rest of the teams in Canada's group. As long as they do what they're supposed to do there, it's going to come down to that Panama result. Now, unfortunately, because they didn't get a lot of goals and the Guadeloupe keeper stood on his head, that means that they are now 3 behind Panama in the goal difference. That won't matter if they win, but what that result did is took the draw kind of off the table, because then you're relying on hoping you blow someone out, right? And that could happen, but you don't want to get in that position, and you certainly wouldn't want to go home on goal diff, and that would be kind of unfortunate. Real quickly, Kevin, we have a lot of American listeners, so I will talk with the U.S. real quickly. What are you going to talk about? They beat the U.S. Virgin Islands 12-0. Which begs the question why the U.S. Virgin Islands are in this tournament, but nonetheless, that's what happened there, and they're 2-0 as the defending champions so far, and their big matchup will probably come against TNT to decide whether they move forward from there. Mexico is also cruising; they're 11 goals for and 0 against in 2 games. Jamaica is their competition in that group. Honduras tops Group C, along with Cuba and Antigua, and then, of course, Group E is Costa Rica's group. They are tied with Haiti right now, and Guatemala and El Salvador are evens in the final group. So top team goes on, then you have basically 2 games to win 1, and if you win 1, you're going to the World Cup. So that's the format. And if you want to hear more about this in a more detailed way, we will be doing a Two Solitudes on Wednesday to review that Panama game, to break down the Under-20 tournament, to talk about it in detail. And you can certainly subscribe to that for $2 a month or more, Kevin.
Exactly. You can subscribe at patreon.com. That's patreon.com/sports podcasting network. $2 a month will give you access to the Two Solitude Soccer podcast, the archives of the Two Solitude Soccer podcast, and all the future shows. And you can do so for $2 a month, and we appreciate your support. Your support helps us continue to do more. It helps us pay for all the bills of the network and pay for our time and for our equipment. So we do thank you a lot for your donations and your pledges. As always, you can follow Duane on social media at 24th Minute. You can follow myself at Kev Laramee, the show at Soccer Today SPN, where you can get the live video show on Twitter every day. As soon as we're live, you'll get the notification, and you can follow us and listen to us live on the Twitter. And until tomorrow, as always, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.